The regular meeting of the Select Board, Winchester. Today is Monday, January 7th. I'm Lance Grensback. I serve as the chair. With me this evening on my right is David Arico and Mariano Goluboff. On my left, Jackie Welsh and Michael Betancourt, our town manager, Lisa Wong. Welcome you all tonight. We will, just as a brief pro forma, that we have notification of upcoming meetings and hearings. The board, in addition to meeting tonight, the board will be meeting again next Monday, January 14th. We will be off the following week, which is a school vacation week. However, if something comes up, we will drag everybody from our board back from vacation to meet. But we will then be meeting on January 28th. Later this evening, we'll try to set some tentative dates for February. So the next two official meetings will be on the 14th and the 28th. I'm going to, with the board's permission, I'll skip over the town manager's reports and the licenses, which we'll do a bit later. We have under G1, under business, we have a number of people who volunteered to serve on several of our committees. And since we've been having them sit out in the corridor for a little bit, I would suggest we take those appointments up now. So, Ruth, I believe you have several people who volunteered to the Climate Action Advisory Committee. Do you want to bring them forward and introduce themselves, and so we can appoint them before they change their mind?
I don't think they will. They've already been attending meetings for a couple of months, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Kim Rowland here and Enrique Brites.
Okay. So you're looking for appointments to the Climate Action Advisory Committee. This is not, a committee that's going to spend large amounts of town's money, but going to help us certainly. Would you mind each of you taking a few minutes just to introduce yourselves and what's your background, what's your interest in this area, and what you'd like to see accomplished? It doesn't have to be a long dissertation, but briefly.
Sure. My name's Kim Rowland. I'm a relatively new resident here in Winchester. Moved here in April. My background is in wildlife biology and conservation biology. I worked for over 15 years. I also have some experience working in planning, doing some climate resiliency work. So I'm here, not working currently, just taking care of the kids, but just looking to get involved in climate action and climate resiliency projects here locally.
Okay, good. We've had a copy of your resume, which is quite impressive. So if you're not doing too much with your time, I think we could put it to good use. I mean, it's really quite a lot of experience, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And is it Henrique, did you pronounce it, or how do you?
Enrique.
Enrique?
Yes, I'm a senior at Winchester High. I've come from Brazil to Winchester at the end of 2017. And since then, I've started getting involved in some environmental efforts. For example, I became the president of the environmental club and got into AP Environmental Science. And even since Brazil, I've been interested in the field. So I'm here more as an observer and non-voting member than an acting member, I guess. I'm here to learn, pretty much.
I will warn you, knowing Ruth, being a non-voting member will not save you from being volunteered to do a lot of work, so that will be good.
In fact, we had no desire to make it specifically a non-voting member, and that's entirely up to Enrique, actually.
Okay.
If that's okay with the board. We'd like to make that, and I've been working with the high school to make it a standing position. So as Enrique leaves, he's going to hand off the baton to hopefully a sophomore, maybe a junior, and would love full membership and voting membership. Discuss later.
Okay, good, thank you. Board member, questions?
So I mean, first, Kim, thank you very much. Your resume looks very impressive, so thank you for volunteering. Enrique, as well, thank you for volunteering. I think there's a lot at the high school itself. It's a big building. There's a lot of people in that building. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for things like composting and energy efficiency that having somebody having a student in the Climate Action Committee can really do a lot to further those efforts at the high school building itself. So I don't have any issue or questions. I'm totally in favor of both of these appointments.
I'm good.
No question?
Yeah, I just would say thank you as well, both of you, for volunteering, and Ruth, thank you for rounding out the Climate Action Advisory Committee. It's great to see some new faces. I wouldn't be opposed at all for Enrique to be a full voting member if that's something that we can do here tonight.
That's
And
really
if
up to
it's
the
something
committee,
you
yeah.
want to do as well, I think it makes sense, and I appreciate, getting some of the young people in town involved in some of our boards and commissions, so they can be, have their evenings filled with some interesting meetings, so thank you. I guess we move on.
We do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you so much for your time and interest, and there's no doubt that you'll further enrich this incredible effort that Ruth and all of her colleagues have worked so tirelessly on behalf of the town and obviously the environment. And I think it's fantastic, as the other board members have indicated, to have a variety of ages on the board, and because they reflect the society in Winchester. So it's, we really applaud everything you've done, Ruth, and all of your colleagues. So thank you so much for everything you do for the town. And welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Kim, my son is working in a research program at Scripps. I doubt I'll ever see him back in Boston for people who spend time in Scripps on the ocean in the summer, so that. Okay, so if there are no further questions, Mr. Goluboff?
Yeah, so I move that we appoint Enrique Brites and Kim Rowland to the Climate Action Advisory Committee, both for terms to expire August 31st, 2021.
And both to be voting members, is that?
Yeah.
You prefer that?
Yes.
If they show, you can abstain from voting, so. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further question? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nays, ayes have it. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Lisa, welcome back. I believe Dr. Matandola has served on the committee before, and welcome back.
Well, thank
So
you.
you're looking for a reappointment, so.
Yes, yes.
Good. Would you perhaps do the same, introduce yourself briefly?
Okay, my name is Lisa Matrandola, born and raised in Winchester, Mass. Have worked in the area of rehabilitation and advocacy for people with disabilities my whole professional life. And I have been on many committees throughout the state and then on the national level, written many grants to help individuals with disabilities. And I had to retire in 2010 because of medical leave. And so I retired in 2010 from the state as medical leave, and have been currently not really doing anything. So when the opportunity came back to be part of this for the town, I was more than happy to put my name in.
Okay. And your long service before has been well recognized and much appreciated, so I don't, unless the board members have questions, I think we might have grabbed her
We're
while she's
honored
still
that you're
interested.
here,
Yes.
and thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much for being willing to help Winchester in this way, where you have so much extensive experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any
Mike,
questions?
No, thank you.
Dave, any questions? Mike? Okay. No?
So I mean, this is a very important position, so really appreciate you volunteering for this. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we appoint Ms. Lisa Matrandola to the Disability Access Commission for a term to expire August 31st, 2019.
Have a second? Seconded? Oh, okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Welcome
for your
back.
time. Thank you.
Okay. So, let's see, town manager's report. Lisa, anything you'd like to update us on?
I thought you'd be interested to know that I did inquire with several department heads about whether we were affected by the federal government shutdown. And so far, there has been no major effect on the town side. Actually haven't touched base with the schools to see if there's any federal funding delays and so on, but just in case, I thought you would like to know that.
We have, actually, the one facility, federal facility in Winchester is the FDA's lab out on Fulton Street, which is apparently one of the few facilities in the country that tests for radioactive nuclides in foods and vegetables imported to the United States, so I don't know what their effect is either.
What about the FEMA grant for fire? That-
If anything, it would be delay in reimbursement.
Okay.
So it,
Hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of this discussion will depend on how long the shutdown lasts. So if it goes on for months, I will say, then we will check in and let you know the implications of that.
Okay.
We had a very successful door decorating contest in town last month, and I want to thank our very own Lance, being one of our celebrity judges.
Mike Day was seen running around trying to catch pictures of the doors too.
Along with Gail at Studio on the Common and our delegation, Rep. Day and Senator Lewis. It was a tough decision, but the police department, the Board of Health, and the building department came out on top for most creative, funniest, most creative, and most festive respectively. So thanks for all the,
Yeah, I would point out, of the 4 judges, only one actually was qualified with any artistic training and good sensibilities, you know, so.
I don't know if the other 3 were bribed at all, but I believe that cookies or other things might have been given out as part of the process. And I also want to let you know that we have some good news and some parting news. We are appointing a police custodian animal control officer to the police department, Edward O'Connell, very well qualified, but that also means that Jerry Smith is retiring after 32 years of service in the city, and we bid him farewell tomorrow.
Okay, do you need a,
Yep.
for Mr. O'Connell's appointment, do we need to waive the 15-day?
I think that's being
Yes.
requested.
That's being requested.
As requested, yeah, so,
So I move that we waive the usual 15-day appointment waiting period, the starting date of Monday, January 14th, 2019, for Edward O'Connell, Animal Control Officer.
Second.
okay, seconded. Any questions? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. And anything further, Lisa, under your side of the, any details, anything else?
Not at the moment.
Okay. That covers that. Do we have any matters from the audience? Does anyone like to, Mr. Lord? No? Nothing? Nothing, no Rotary, no Chamber of Commerce? Okay, pretty quiet. Okay. I believe you have in your packet, there was reported here the November financial update. I'm not sure it made it into the packet. It was not.
Yep.
Was yours? Okay. And somehow it didn't make it into mine, but we'll deal with that later. Okay.
Try to keep certain things from you, Lance.
Yeah, believe me, that was one of the ones that I really appreciate.
So that's the reason why yours was thinner than the other.
Yeah.
I must thank the Xerox machine for leaving me out, okay? Then we have under E licenses, we need to vote to renew the licenses for Stop and Shop as a food vendor and Fuller Cup as an entertainment license. I think these were 2 that were outstanding when we did our,
Yeah, I didn't see the licenses in my packet.
They are actually, they're just the ones to be signed, the usual ones.
I
that
just
you
wanna
guys
read
have.
them.
Oh, yes.
That way I can make the motion.
yeah.
These 2? Okay. All right, so Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve or grant an entertainment license to the Fuller Cup at 11 Thompson Street to operate between the hours of 6 PM and 8 PM on Thursday evenings for the purpose of live music.
Second.
All in seconded?
Yes.
Okay, any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nays, ayes have it.
Chairman, I move that we grant a food vendor license to Stop and Shop Supermarket at 695 Main Street.
Second.
Seconded, okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 I suppose, okay. Let's go that, and please remember to sign them as we go out. It's 8 o'clock. We have 2 hearings that we carried over from before vacation, before the holidays. One deals with North Main Street, petition to provide handicap parking, and the second on Old Village Road to install no parking signs on one side of the road. I think at the opening hearing we held, we had incomplete information. We were going to, on Old Village Road, I think the town engineer and DPW director were planning to take a sort of a site visit and take a look at the locations. And I believe that we were also going to check on the case of the Main Street location we were gonna talk with some of the business owners in that area, and I believe Mr. Rico has started to do that. But we don't, because too many people were away on holiday over the period, I don't think we have any great additional information, so I'm gonna propose to the board that we basically continue those hearings yet again, continue them to the 14th, and at that time, we try to pool all the information we have from the town engineer, DPW, and the merchants. So without, I guess, I don't know whether they need a formal vote or just consent by the committee to continue
Sounds good
those
to me.
until the next time. So,
That's fine.
okay, we'll do that then. Okay. Did you want to do the consent agenda before we go into the other
Sure.
topics?
And at table,
So we
there's,
don't forget them?
yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve one-day alcoholic beverage licenses for Yaritza Menjivar for Griffith Museum, January 17th, 2019, at the Griffin Museum.
Second.
Or Griffin House?
Griffin.
No, Griffin Museum. To Jane Boswell for Parish of the Epiphany, January 19th, 2019, at Parish of the Epiphany.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Ayes have it, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept a donation of $2,000 from the Johnston family to be used toward future supplies for the police department with the appreciations of the board to the Johnston family.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Move that we accept a donation of $500 from the Luce family to be used towards future supplies for the police department with many thanks to the Luce family from the board.
Seconded, okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. And I would note that in the communications, there's a letter from the Home and Garden Club supporting the renovation of the pavilion. I don't think there's any action required at this moment, but Jackie, since you've been tracking the plans for the common, maybe at some point we have a quieter night, you can brief us and update us on their plans.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So then let's return to business item G2, which was to begin to discuss our 2020 budget and carry on some of the conversations that were started in our working sessions last week and this week. I guess those of you in the audience who have not been following this in any great detail, but we have been working for the past 6 to 8 months to look at what our expenses are likely to be over the next few years and the revenue that's needed to keep the town working. We have, during last late summer and fall, we basically took the approach of looking at the trends in our budget. We took each of the major categories, each of the major departments, looked at the trends in the growth rate in expenses in the last 5 to 8 years and projected those out, making some judgments about whether those rates were likely to continue as they were, higher or lower. We came up with some estimates of the need for an override amount. We presented those Mike presented an early look at those at the Springtown meeting, and we did another second, more extensive presentation at the Fall Town meeting. Since then, we have been asking Lisa and others to go back and do another analysis, which is take the detailed line items budgets and build those up, looking at what the departments actually need this year and the next year. We've been working with Superintendent Judy Evans to do the same thing with the school pieces. So we have been putting those two together. And I'll summarize it. It looks at the moment as if we were to go into the 2020 fiscal year without an override, we would need about $5 million to maintain current levels of service. This is making no significant changes to our set of programs and services across town. One of the questions that we wanted to look at tonight is, if that were the case, how would we make up that $5 million in order to keep things afloat? One of the questions is then, do we use some of our reserve funds to do that? And what's the balance between using reserve funds and cutting budgets and services? And we can ask Lisa to sort of summarize that for us. The other thing we did, and Lisa's been working on over was for a weekend doing it, I think, was to look at, the second question is, instead of just keeping things on, just maintaining sort of where we were today, level of services, how much additional monies would we need to keep up with growth in the town, keep pace with the growth in population, and particularly in the school population, and also how much would we need to basically improve some of the programs in town so that on the school side we maintain comparable and competitive with other other surrounding towns. And on the town municipal side, how we keep up with the need to maintain a much larger high school, to maintain roads and sewer services for the increasing number of residents. It looks at the moment as though that kind of a budget would require us to come up with somewhere in the range of $8 million over the next years to sustain that. And we're working, we've been told that that budget may leave out some critical needs. So we're looking at potentially one that might push us back up closer to 10 million, which was the estimate that we reported to the town meeting in the fall. So I think we've had some discussion earlier in the week on the status of our work on that. The question of is the $8 or $10 million budget sufficient is going to require a few more days of work, and the FinCom Finance Committee is going to be looking at that in some detail tonight and tomorrow. But I think the immediate question that the board wanted to discuss tonight was if we don't get an override and we're showing a $5 million shortfall for next year, what instructions would we like to give to Lisa and the school committee on how we should handle that? So I'll maybe ask Lisa if you might want to just give us a general summary of what the projected, now this is a draft at this point, projected budget for 2020 looks like, and then we can turn back to the question of some initial guidelines perhaps on how we would address that shortfall.
Sure. So I usually like to begin any budget process with taking a look at the revenue side, so we can actually create a balanced budget. Right now, we project revenues to be just under $120 million. I requested then that the departments give me a level service budget, so maintaining the level of services that are provided in this current fiscal year, fiscal 19. And also did a deeper dive into other kinds of expenses that really impact the budget, namely things like health insurance. So in working with our consultant, for example, our health insurance, which in fiscal year 19 is just above $11 million, we're projecting that there be a potentially 7 to 8% increase, which is almost $1 million. So that will bring our health insurance cost to about $12 million or so. This is based on December estimate. We continue to get numbers in, but those are the kinds of things that impact our budget pretty significantly. So if you're looking at an $800,000 to $1 million increase in health insurance, for example, a level service budget is approximately a 2% increase in total municipal government budgets, which is just about $500,000. So when you're looking at increases in the municipal side, you're not necessarily talking about increase in people. You're essentially just talking about increase in health insurance and then some contractual obligations and so on. So in working with the schools, they do have some growth. Their level service budget is about a 5.78% increase, which in total brings the increase in municipal and education at 5.34%. So that leads to the bottom line of a approximately $5 million deficit if we were to have consistent revenues and also look at a level service budget. In the second request of departments, it was looking at a needs budget. So what other needs do we require? I don't think I can speak adequately on the school side. I know that there's been significant discussion, especially based on growth in numbers and the kinds of services that parents and school children would like to see. But on the municipal side, I can speak to public safety and public works primarily, and looking at additional assistance in patrol units, dispatchers, in firefighters, in the detective unit, and needing several people in the Department of Public Works, in maintenance, 3 primarily for the schools, again, related to the increase, 1 at the high school, 2 at McCall. There is an expansion going on there, as well as somebody at the cemetery and transfer station. So if you look at the additional requests from the municipal side, between a needs budget and a level service budget, it's approximately $1.8 million. If you add that to the request at the school side for a 8.46% increase, that brings our total municipal education budget from 79 million to about 82.3 million. So bottom line is the needs budget would create a gap of approximately $8 million.
I guess our board has discussed this at length, and we made this presentation to town meeting, but for those of you who are listening at home, the question of why are you looking at the $5 or $8 million shortfall? And the fairly straightforward answer is that our expenditures have outgrown our revenue. The expenditures are basically driven by population. We've gone from about 21,000 20 years ago to nearly 23,000 residents. And we've had a huge increase relatively in school children. We've gone from, increased by about 1,500 over the last 20 years, I believe. And we're looking at perhaps another 600 to 700 new students over the next 5 to 10 years. So when people want to have their children educated, we need teachers and classroom space, and that's been driving it up. The other thing that's been driving up expenses is, as Lisa mentioned, healthcare, energy costs, and others. We've gone to great extents both to cut the number of staff and to cut those expenses, but I think we've run out of relatively straightforward ways to improve the cost efficiency and cost effectiveness of our services. So at this point, we are faced with the Massachusetts state law, which says that if you'd like to raise your revenue, you have to go back to the electorate and ask them if they would like to raise the revenue. We've done this about every 10 years. In 2000, we raised about $6.5 million through an operating override at the ballot to fund this town at that time. Did a smaller one worth about $2 or $3 million just about 10 years ago in 2008. The cycle has come due. We need to go back to the voters and ask, do they want to maintain the level of services in the town, the level of investment in our schools? And this is the sort of budget work that we're going through now to figure out how much that would cost. So I guess, Lisa, thanks for the update. Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the details and so clearly presented and so easy to understand. But I just wanted to clarify for the record, so that's the 5 to 8 million that was identified with the second scenario. That's for the fiscal year. So that's not multiplied by multiple years. That's just 1 year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the $8 million reflects the needs that we would request for fiscal year 20. So that doesn't include additional needs based on, for example, additional school growth in future years.
Exactly, okay. And then as long as I ask that question, I may as well ask the kind of companion question, is that the earlier number that you gave, which is just sort of level funded, which I think you said 1.8 million, if I had that right, that's also just for the 1 year, correct?
Let's see, the deficit is 5 million. I think the 1.8 increase.
That's additional requests for minimum, yeah. Whatever that number was for the level funding, I am having trouble reading my own handwriting, but in any event, that's also, my point is simply that that's also just for 1 year, correct?
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So then if somebody was going to ask that, and I guess we'll probably be about to get into this, so that we wouldn't have the same level of need every year, then I'm giving the natural segue, Mr. Chairman, to the next part of this discussion, which is then what would you sort of anticipate would be kind of the right numbers to be thinking about for future years? So in other words, if you multiply it by 3 years, are you basically multiplying those two respective numbers by 3 years? Kind of depends on the other projections, right?
You're not actually multiplying. If you took, for example, a $10,000 increase in the tax levy,
Right.
then you could use up to $10,000.
Oh, I don't mean that. I just meant the numbers that Ms. Wong just gave, which was so helpful to understand in that very clear way that she presented it. So because those only are reflective of 1 year's need, if you were gonna, if you didn't like have that amount, that would proportionately be the same for those respective years unless there was some other multiplier effect, such as even more students or even higher healthcare rates, et cetera.
So I think if you don't factor in student growth and you
Right.
just looked at saying, let's maintain the amount of service we have and not do anything significantly different for expenses and revenue side, there will continue to be a growing gap. That gap, more or less, is approximately 2%.
Okay. Very helpful,
I-
thank you.
I think,
Yeah, you-
I think what, the wages go up at around 3%, right? And then
And then if we have
in
more
Prop two and a
students-
half,
Right.
so there's a built-in deficit there with Prop two and a half, and then we have growth, so there's another deficit. I think that maybe this year the number is a little bigger because we're really,
Making up for,
well, we're making up for two things. One is the deficit last year, right? So last year we passed a $2 million deficit budget, so we're already starting from further in the red. And then, health insurance has gone up significantly the last last year and then this year. But also because there's been a lot of needs that were deferred for so many years in order to try to not go into the red as much, right? So, whether it's, in staffing in many departments,
right, but
whether
that
it's
would be,
fire
that
or,
would be the second number, because the first number is maintaining, right?
yeah.
Well, I don't know, Jackie may not be answering your question, but if you're $5 million short in 2020, you need to find $5 million. You'd have to find the same $5 million and more
The
the
next year.
following year.
Exactly.
Plus
Right.
the
Exactly.
2%.
But
Plus the two, and you'd have a, increase in cost and some increase in revenue.
I think what you're getting to is that if we had 8 million this year, it's not gonna be another 8 million the year after that, right? Because that 8 million will include a large part of that will be first making up the deficit from last year, and also making up for a lot of the deferred investments that we didn't make for the last 3-4 years. So that will not carry on to 2021, right? Because that will have already caught up. But there is
It's almost like
some,
it almost will become almost like level funding.
but there
the-
will,
The second number even, yeah.
well, not if
After
we
you make-
continue to have the same growth that we have been having, which has been right in line with
Even
what's been
more.
projected, right?
Right.
So there is some amount in 21 and 22 that is beyond, but it's not another 8 million. Right, definitely.
Anyway, I appreciate how clear that was. Very well explained. Thank you.
Mike, did you comment?
Yeah, I think that we've done a good job of planning in the past and been able to keep things going, and we haven't been hit in previous years with healthcare expenses and kind of unfunded mandate issues on the school side with special education, but now kind of everything is converging in one place, and so we're going to need to deal with that as soon as possible. The only thing that I would say, the issue for me is just that we are evaluating impact on residents of all ages, and we're having that conversation at a very soon point. So whether we are having a public hearing or we are engaging with the Council on Aging, I don't know. But certainly on the school side, I think that we've evaluated what the needs are and what the current demands are, and enrollment seems like it's just continuing on the upward trajectory. So there's not really much that we can do. There's no bubble like we thought maybe was there, years ago, that the enrollment was going to start to decline. It just continues to increase. So we've got to deal with those issues, and we've got to maintain our excellent schools and keep our teachers. So that's all I would say.
So I guess there's two issues that we've been dealing with in earlier meetings. One is, if you do not get an override, how do you cover next year's $5 million shortfall? And we're going to try to deal with that tonight. The second question is, even if you deal with next year, you've still got the years after that. And do you go for an override that's 5, 7, or 8, or 10 million? Because once you do that, then you have that money for the following years. And the question is, you don't want to undershoot it and have to go back for another override a few years later. You don't want to overshoot it and then put up the tax bills higher than you actually need to keep your services going. So I think we're going to try to deal with the first question tonight, was the earlier discussion about how you cover if you do not have an override. If the voters were to turn it down, how would we manage through the 2020 budget? And
Between cuts and use of free
Free-
cash.
correct.
And
yeah.
also, as a follow-up, it would be, the distribution of cuts percentage-wise? Are we bringing that up?
Correct, yeah.
We need to?
Yeah. So for those of you who are following, the comptroller and the FinCom, and I'm missing my numbers, maybe Mariana, you have a
Yeah,
sheet,
have it.
if you want to, we have, I believe, approximately $5.6 million of available funds in the reserve fund, if that's correct. And the question was, how much of that do we set aside to deal with the budget deficit, and how much should we reserve for, which is typically used as unanticipated emergency spending over the course of the year. So I think we were,
Yeah.
I'm searching through the paperwork here, see if one of us has a scratch notes from the
Yeah,
earlier
so,
discussions. If you can remember them, I'll let you start off.
Yeah, so what we have is, so we were talking about using somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million from reserves to make up the deficit, the $5 million deficit, and for the rest to be cuts from the budgets.
Okay. So, in picking, I mean, one question is, you know, do you spend down the entire reserve amount? And the argument we've been dealing with, or concern we've been dealing with, is if you do that and you have an exceptionally heavy year of snow, which we might yet have, I don't know, if you have something that falls apart, you know, a boiler, a school roof, a building piece, a piece of fire equipment that suddenly fails or is damaged, knows. If you use up the whole of the reserve fund, you have nothing left to use, and you'd have to go into kind of an emergency fund. And I think that what they were telling us is they would like to keep approximately $2 to $2.5 million in that
Yeah.
fund as a buffer against emergency uses and others, which would leave us in that, Mariana was saying, $2.5 to $3 million to apply against the budget. So I guess one question for the board is, do we feel comfortable at 2 and 3/4, or 3? How much do we want to draw down, Mr. Rico?
Could I ask town manager's thoughts and analysis on that question?
So we spent about 1.9 million in the fiscal year 19 budget. There are some other one-time revenues that we did use to balance fiscal year 19, and those reserves are gone. For example, is $152,000 in, trying to think of what that line item is called.
Parking meter.
Yeah, the parking meter revenue. So we used 152,000, and now there's nothing in that fund.
Mm.
So I think we sort of have to keep in mind that we've already used funds that have now gone down to zero, and they're not an option. So if the reserve fund is our major resource left to do multiple things, including balance the budget, I'll say I would err on the cautious side and say that we should use as little as possible. So when we're looking at the range, you know, we can, and I will prepare options for the limited use, and then what we can do is say that if I'm saying that we should use like 2 million or less, this is what it means. And then, you know, we can kind of come and take a look at it and say that, you know, of that, of those cuts, you know, 200,000, I think we can live with or find another alternative. This $200,000 we can't. So my intention is to try to still budget as conservatively as possible, but provide the realistic impacts of what those cuts mean, so that we can have that discussion.
So with a range of 2, 2.5 to 3, your inclination is to be more conservative towards the
2?
2 million?
Aim to 2.
Aim to 2. And could I ask also, do you have an opinion on, so if there were to be cuts, percentage-wise to go to school, percentage-wise to go to municipal?
I think it's hard to give percentages. If you just did a straight percentage of what the share of the budget is,
Right.
it's approximately 1/3, 2/3.
1/3 municipal, 2/3 school.
But I think I think that should be a starting point, but then the implications are gonna be, what does that really mean? So if that number for, that target number for schools is somewhere between $1 and $1.5 million, we need to understand what that means. And then if the target number on the city side is, let's say, $500 to $1 million, we need to understand what that means. And that number will shift, and as that shifts, that will shift the percentage. So I'm not gonna commit myself to an exact percentage, but I'll say that division gives us a range to aim for on both sides.
Let me just add, if we use 2.5 million out of the reserves, that means we would have to find cuts of, what was the balance,
The balance is 4.7 total, right? The deficit is 4.734, so if we use how much?
If we use 2.5, then you're looking at.
2.234.
2.2.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'd allocate that between schools and the municipal side. And I guess part of the question would turn on, in the school side, to save money, they basically are gonna have to lay off staff.
Can I just make a point of information, before you get to that, because that's kind of like getting into the next with the percentage, but just so it's clear, 4.7 total debt, 2.5, under that scenario, it's if you use as free cash and 2.2 is cuts, or were you saying the opposite?
2.2 is cuts, you're correct.
Yeah, okay, so,
So in the
but
allocation.
I think actually Ms. Wong was saying, if I heard her correctly, maybe more in the range of, I know we're not boxing her in, but she was thinking conservatively, there's some justification for having it be more like 2.0, right, 2 million, or 1.9, you were saying, as opposed to the 2.5, right?
Or 3.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and if that's the
Okay,
case,
well,
then your number.
if we used only 2, then you'd have, what, 2.7 cuts?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
The 2 million, so, because we had two different numbers, is the 2 million, assuming that the retiring debt still goes to capital, or is that, so essentially 3 million from free cash? Or is it 2 million included, so 2 million excluding the free capital transfer, which becomes 3 million from free cash? Or 2 million including the transfer, the retiring debt transfer?
Right now, I still have the retiring debt transfer in this particular spreadsheet that shows a $5 million deficit. Right now, I'm aiming to keep it in.
Okay. So would that be 3 million then in usage from free cash, or still 2 million in free cash, so we have to cut somewhere else? Okay.
Exactly. So essentially what I'm doing is I start off with the most conservative, which
Yeah.
is, what are all the potential areas that we can cut back on? What are the implications? And then, sort of providing that menu to see, what's palatable. So if we want to continue to do those kinds of projects, and we need to cut 3 million, that's what we're going to present. Of that, sometimes FinCom says, well, we can cut a little bit more, or sometimes we can say, these are areas that have gone too far. Those discussions, I think, we're still, I'm personally still open to, and I'm having those conversations right now, still with the various departments.
Chairman? And so I would presume that part of your thinking too is, what you've said in the past is, to be more conservative is also, in keeping to preserve our bond rating, and to also have, funds available in the future if there wasn't an override passed this year. So 2 additional reasons for being more conservative on cash used.
Anticipating future uses, anticipating unanticipated costs. Knowing from bond counsel that any downgrade, even to a AAA, could amount to several $1 million in additional costs for borrowing. So essentially, if you're using the free cash, but then you're increasing your expenses on the borrowing part, then you're kind of washing that out. So I would rather be cautious, knowing that we have some borrowing in our future.
So if we use $2 million out of the reserves,
And had to do 2.7 in cuts,
do
that's
somewhere around
really big.
2.5, 2.7
Yeah.
in cuts, then the question is, the school committee is going to be interested in having the allocation of that 2.7, I assume. for their budget hearings tomorrow night. So we were then, the question is, do we divide it 1/3, 2/3, or would you give more money to the schools to preserve and avoid teacher layoffs and things like that? I mean, we probably need to tell them, give them general preference on our part. You know.
If I could sort of weigh in, and I'll say
Yep,
that,
no, that's-
I think because the schools are voting fairly shortly, I mean, I don't recommend that the schools cut more than $1.5 million.
Okay.
Right now, I'm still presenting a lot of variables on my end. The schools have to accommodate a lot of growth. I'm still considering what that growth means on my end. It's not as direct, it's different. You know, we're looking at the evaluation of the residential growth, for example, in public safety, public works, and so on. It's not, I say, as direct of an impact, but there's still an impact. But I would say it's fair for me to say that I don't recommend the schools cut more than $1.5 million.
Okay, so if we were to use 2 million out of,
Right, then that'd be 2.25. Because 1.5 million is, if that's a 2/3
oh, yeah, yeah. so-
proportion, then you're adding another, yeah.
No, I mean, that would, 2.7 total, right? So that would be 1.2 million from the municipal side and 1 point, but, my view is, looking at the numbers that the school committee is looking at, I would not want to see the schools cut more than 1 million, from their budget, given, just seeing what their budget looks like and what they would have to cut, even at 1 million, it's very painful. So I think 1.5 million would be just very, very drastic. And I'd be willing to go to the $2.5 million free cash usage to make up that $500,000. So, you know, so that would be my view, is to limit the school cuts to 1 million, and if we have to go to 2.5 million in free cash usage, do
And
that.
just for the record, we're talking about fiscal '20, right?
Yeah.
So fiscal '20, do we know, does anybody know, or perhaps anybody here from the school committee, about the student projection increase for FY '20? Because there is gonna be an increase, I believe. And so if that's the case, then whatever cuts are gonna be magnified because of that increase. So it's like the amount going down and yet the demand and need going up. So I guess I'm in line with what Mr. Voloboff was saying, particularly in that context.
I'm sorry, Dave?
I think, you know, my thoughts are, again, this is under a scenario where the override doesn't pass. It's happened before. And I would say that the pain and suffering should be shared proportionally. I'd be willing to look to increase the use of free cash from 2 to 2.5 million, but to keep it at the 2/3, 1/3. Again, I think you could make the same arguments that there'll be disproportionate pain and suffering on police, fire, DPW if we overload those municipal departments with additional cuts. So again, should be shared proportionally based upon the budget as we have today. I'm inclined to go from 2 to 2.5, but to stick with that 2/3, 1/3, because I think the other municipal departments will just have just as much pain and suffering.
I mean, the only variable that maybe none of us know sitting here, though, is that, and I don't disagree with you in concept at all, and obviously, this is a hard conversation for all of us, because it's the last thing we want to have happen, but, and we're very sensitive and mindful of the impact on everyone, so we're hoping this is just gonna be a theoretical conversation, I guess, to some extent, but, I'm just very concerned about the projections that, we've been informed about on the school side about the increase in students, so, and I don't know that there's that same pressure, with all due respect, on the non-school side. So that's just what I'm trying to not lose sight of, so that the overall impact on the school side, they're in a it's like a perfect storm, you know what I mean?
Well,
'Cause-
yeah, I mean, I think.
And we don't and I'm not sure we have that same data on the non-school side, but I'm totally sensitive to what you're saying, I completely understand, I think everybody in this table, it's.
So if
this
you were
is
at
very
2.5 million and you wanted to cap the schools at 1 million, you add in a $500,000,
It'd be 1.5, yeah.
a
on
half a
that.
million to municipal, so you're talking 1.2 cuts there. I mean, you know, you're talking losing significant amount of,
Free cash.
not free cash, but, you know, police and fire.
Oh, right, but I meant, you're also, by having it 1.5 in the cuts,
Right.
because it'd be 1.5 in cuts if it's 1 million on the school side, and if you're keeping that same percentage.
Yeah. Again, I just don't think that's fair to police, fire, and DPW.
I don't think
to throw
anybody
an
wants
extra
to be
$500,000.
unfair, maybe we should find out what the school.
Well, we don't have time. We need to give school and.
Does anybody here on the school committee know
Lisa.
that number? Are student enrollment increasing in FY '20 projected?
It is. I think the main, we're seeing is the main increases this year are middle and high school, or mainly high school. And then looking ahead to next year, the classes going into the middle school, the class from 5th grade into 6th grade is larger than the class that's leaving. So middle school will be going up next year. And we're projecting needing one additional teacher one additional class section and teacher at the elementary level this year, because we really never know about kindergarten until very close to the beginning of the school year. So, yeah, we are seeing continued sort of steady enrollment growth.
Okay, thank you, that was helpful.
And that's been really tracking the projections from the master plan, right? So I think a few years ago, we kind of weren't sure if that level was going to continue, but now we really know that it's not going anywhere soon.
Well, it's not gonna be the same number.
I guess, so if you have, if we use 2.5 million out of the reserves, that leaves 2.2 deficit to be made up in cuts. And we have an option of allocating that 1.5 to schools and 0.7 to municipal, or 1.2 to schools and 1.0 to municipal, or 1.0, as Mario was saying, and 1.2 to the municipal. I guess part of the question is whether on the municipal side, in the range of, 700,000 to 1.2 million, whether if you make those cuts, are you dropping our police and fire below
Mandated.
mandated
Levels.
or, certifiable things? I mean, it's, not that I don't want to suggest in front of the school committee, it might be easier to cut money out of the school budget, because that's an obvious problem, but if we cut our municipal budget, and we don't have police or fire to, capacity, that's gonna be another serious problem. Is there a threshold or at risk in that range? I know, it's a sort of a hard number to guess, but it's a difference between $500,000 or so in cuts.
I think that we've already been really underfunding, police and fire for years, and DPW, so we've been
DPW's lost how many guys?
Yeah, so we've been cutting back, and there is a cost of that as well, because then we hire out some of those services that we would do in-house before, so, and that's why you see some of the snow and ice budget increasing, and, other costs, so, no matter what, there's gonna be kind of a consequence in either direction. I can't possibly wrap my head around how the schools are gonna cut even $1 million. I mean, it's just, it's gonna be really, really rough, and, teachers aren't temporary workers, they're not just waiting around, and the growth that we've seen in our region means that there is demand at higher pay levels for teachers, in other positions, so, that's what we're up against as well. So teachers that have committed a long time to this community and to our students are at risk, of having to look elsewhere because of unsurety for what we're doing. So that's the only thing. I think it's going to be the cuts will be painful either way.
I guess we talked about some earlier, we've talked about them as separate DPW and school, they're not.
Yeah.
2/3 of the DPW work probably goes toward school maintenance and other activities, and the school resource officers are paid out of the police budget, so it's not as though they're not two separate pots that live independently of each other, so if you whack the police, fire, DPW, and other services, you're also depriving the schools of the ability to maintain the buildings and get the police services they need, so it's not quite as clean a
I
look.
mean, it's painful for everybody, right? Because whether it's 500,000 from one side or the other, that's town employees that have dedicated their life to the town. So I mean, the other option is reducing the retiring debt transfer. I mean, not to zero, because we have multi-year projects like the radios for public safety that we can't really stop that, but, you know, I mean, the impact is that we wouldn't be doing roads and sidewalks maybe for a year. You know, if we can find a few $100,000 there to reduce the retiring debt transfer to capital, that would be, you know, I would be open to that. I don't want to get rid of it completely because they're important projects, but safety-related projects that need to be done, but,
What's the number you're talking about there?
so that's, I mean, the total transfer right now is pegged at
The 220.
600,
72,000.
672,000. So, the public safety radios is 125,000 a year, so, you know, if we say transfer 250,000, and then that's 400,000 that we gain, and so that would be, if we cut 1 million from schools, I hate to take 400,000 from capital, because deferring capital investments
that's
is
not
a,
good.
it's a terrible long-term strategy.
Well, they're already deferred, I mean, right?
Well,
So
they're right,
it's,
they're already deferred, so it's, I mean,
And there are costs, I mean, it's just, that's the thing, you know, how much more expensive is it?
but maybe if we cut 300,000 of that instead of, you know, and then that leaves 900,000 for the municipal side.
Could we just know, as another point of information, maybe Ms. Wong's the best to answer this, just generally speaking, what the overall budget is for schools on an annual basis and municipal side? I probably should know myself, but I don't want to say the wrong figure.
What's that?
The overall budget amount for schools annually and the overall budget amount for non-school,
Before we cut it?
correct?
The level service fiscal year 2020 budget for municipal departments is 25,076,000. Education is, I have salaries and expenditures separately, so 45, 46,
53,
53 million.
53, 56, basically.
Oh, so that's not 2/3, 1/3. 53 million and 25 million?
It's more than that. I thought it was, Judy said
Well,
67.
But you have undistributed costs too that have
It
to
is
go.
2/3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
By the
that
time
doesn't.
you add all of those in, yeah.
Oh, right, that's not the full budget.
That's not, that's
Okay.
just the direct, you know,
Okay.
heat, electricity, pensions and everything.
Health insurance.
Health insurance, big, so. Well, so, let me step back a second. So at one level, this is all hypothetical, right?
That's good
We're not
news.
at the point where we have to actually make a 2020 budget and commit to it. And it basically strengthens the argument that you really need to go seriously after an override. But I guess, let me suggest as a starting point, is I think what the school committee needs is general guidance, what they can work with tomorrow night in their hearing. We're not committed to that endlessly, but we can certainly adjust that as go. So if there's 4.7 in the reserve funds, and we were to commit 2.5 of that to try to balance the 2020 budget in the case of no override, that means we would have $2.2 million to make up from cuts. And one option would be to say, take 1.2 out of the schools and 1.0 out of the municipal. Is that
I would say
general guidance, or?
I would say 1 million from each then, and 234,000 from the retiring debt transfer.
Okay. Is that, this is kind of
Right.
pick one at this point. What we're trying to do is give some general guidance to the school committee for their budgeting tomorrow night. We're not committed to it. And,
I can't imagine how many layoffs $1 million cutting out of both of those budgets is, so I don't want to make it bigger.
Okay.
I agree.
So I guess is that, are we in general consensus that we should do 2.5 out of reserves, giving us a $2.2 million need to cut, one out of schools, one out of municipal, and move in basically $250,000 or so from the capital side as a starting point? These are guidelines, I guess, for the budgeting.
What do
Yeah,
you
I
guys-
could
what do
go
you
with
guys
that,
think?
yeah. I think, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of options here. I mean, you know,
I don't
it's,
think there's gonna be a perfect answer at this point.
so, but, you know, and we'll see what that means for each of the budgets, you know, so, because it's hard for us to know exactly on the school side what that looks like.
This is not a recommendation, it's going to
Right.
town meeting for implementation immediately.
Yeah, and I guess that this isn't a policy that will actually happen. We're giving this as guidance to the school committee to do their budget forecasting, but the caveat is that if the override does not happen, if there is no override, and then we reserve the right to make changes in this, because if it is determined that the $1 million in cuts doesn't give us the requisite mandated coverage for police and fire, then this board reserves the right to make changes.
So I'll say a couple of things about that. One is the town manager has to submit a budget by the middle of February to Finance Committee. This year, two budgets. One will be the budget that balances based on an override not passing, and the other one, the budget based on an override passing. And so there's not many changes that this board can make after that at all. Second, in the end, it's town meeting's decision to appropriate money. It's not this board's decision to appropriate money. We recommend a budget to FinCom, and then FinCom recommends a budget to town meeting, and town meeting appropriates. So, you know, I'm thinking, you know,
It's a recommendation.
it's a recommendation from our side.
That's what I'm saying, but again, so she's got until
Between now and February 15th, we ought to.
February 15th, so you're still running your numbers, you're doing your analysis, and if you determine in a couple of weeks that, hey, to cut $1 million from, you know, police and fire is not gonna
And
give
town.
us what we need, you'll come back to us and say, school committee's gotta do some more cutting on their end.
Okay. Get out the Ouija board, Chris. Yeah, okay. So I guess maybe the point that the school committee was looking for is if we want to put a motion on the table to use 2.5 out of the reserves and to leave a cuts of 2.2 to be made up of 1 from schools, 1 from municipal, and approximately $250,000 to be moved over out of capital.
Budget recommendations.
These are our general recommendations
Yeah.
at this point in time.
You want a
So they can
motion?
do their budget
All right,
analysis.
so I move that we direct the town manager to draw a budget that uses $2.5 million of free cash to balance it. That to do so, instruct the school committee to submit a budget that cuts $1 million from their submitted budget, level services budget, and the remainder be to be determined, but around $1 million from municipal departments and the rest from the retiring debt transferred to capital.
Second.
Seconded, okay. Any further questions?
Yeah,
This is a preliminary, go ahead, yeah, Dave.
For example, what's the budget for the police department is 5 million? That sound right? So, just hypothetically, if they had to cut 10%, how many police officers would that be, and does that leave us enough policemen to patrol Winchester? But food for thought, that's what you're gonna be doing, some more digging, but I'm prepared to move forward with the thought that we reserve the right to,
I mean, 10%
Review.
if I have my math
Well, if
right.
it's a $500,000
of 5
bucks.
million, right, but I mean, that would be half of the 1 million. I mean,
So you've
wouldn't
got
it be spread a
DPW,
little thinner than that?
town
I mean,
hall. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we,
say it's
I,
400,000.
I mean,
You got a million
No.
divided by,
that will be up to Lisa to figure out.
And the chief to do
But, you know, I don't imagine that it would be 10% from police, given that that would be half of the municipal cuts, so, and
Math doesn't make
there's
sense.
other departments in the municipal side, so.
Okay. So if we're ready to vote, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, okay, so that provides us general guidance. Then in the next week, I think Lisa and the FinCom are gonna turn back to the question of what's it take, how much of an override should we be proposing? I think the discussions in the last couple of weeks have suggested that a $5 million override probably would not sustain us for very long, and we'd have to go back and try again a year or so from now. That somewhere in the 7 or 8 might, but it's not clear that we could then replenish our reserve funds. So we may be back to looking at something in the range of 10 plus a couple million for capital. A lot of detailing to be done on that, but that would be consistent with what we told town meeting. It's a sizable number, but on a $120 million budget where we haven't done an override in 10 years, it's probably not unreasonable. But we'll go back and take a look at it in more detail.
And could
see
we
what-
also, maybe if West Wong has time, or maybe we should, as our board, look at other, maybe options on the ballot, including the pyramid override?
We could certainly
option?
look at that, yeah. Okay, Mike?
And
comments?
I think too, we really need to, at the same time, be having the impact discussion on residents, seniors in particular. So if there are other things that we can do to lessen the impact or put more burden on members of the community that can absorb this increase, I think we need to do that. So I think we've been trying to be creative and figure out the numbers for a long time, but I think we need to start a public conversation about it. And
Yeah, there's
happy to help
two
with that.
things. And Mariano, in one of our earlier work sessions, suggested that even if we were to go for an $8 or $10 million override, we would have the option of drawing down some reserve funds. So you wouldn't have to tax everybody the first year, the total amount. Could lower the total ceiling a little bit. And
Or have
Dave-
it graduated?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically graduated up.
Right.
We have the option of spreading, we don't have to do everything, take the entire $8 or $10 million in one bite. We could presumably ramp it up over a couple of years.
And that wouldn't have to be part of the ballot question. That would be a tool that could be
So,
used.
yeah, so the way it works is that the override raises the amount, the total levy that we're allowed to tax. But we would have two budgets, and so the first budget is the austerity one that we just directed. Then the second budget would be what we would appropriate for next year. That budget would show possibly, I mean, we're still looking at this, but that we would not tax to the total amount, because we are looking at an override that lasts for more than just 1 year, right? We don't want to have to go to the voters every year. I know other towns go to the voters every year for an override, but especially since a lot of it is in enrollment projections for the next 3 to 5 years, is that we would allocate a certain amount of, we would propose to town meeting to appropriate a certain amount of money the first year, which would be a percentage of the total increase. And then the second year, some of that other increase would kick in.
We did ask Stacy Ward, our comptroller, to ask the state. You have to ask for one amount,
Yeah,
and you actually have to specify exactly how much you're going to spend in the first year, but you don't have to say what you're going to spend. But it can be, as Mariana said, less, and you don't have to say how much you're going to spend in the second and third years, but you could work out you could basically go to town meeting and say, here's a business plan and how much to spend, so, yeah, right.
yeah, I mean, the idea being that if $12 million, for example, that's a 10%, right? We don't want to have a 10% increase in taxes on 1 year, right? So the idea would be to spread that out over 2 to 3 years. That way the impact is not as marked.
And yet you don't have to spend the resources to have another vote, et cetera.
Right, and it's not just the resources to have another vote, but it's to also allow the departments to plan, right? So, because if you're planning on buying equipment for more firefighters or for more police, but you don't know if, in 2 years you're going to have the funding to hire those additional officers that you're going to need, then, it makes sense to have multi-year planning on, than to plan year to year, so.
Yeah, and to Mike's other question, Dave convened a meeting for about, I don't know how many people showed up, about a dozen during the holiday period to look at the question. Maybe, Dave, you want to look at the question of how might you be able to reduce the tax impact on older seniors who might do that? I don't know whether, it's a pretty complicated.
Yeah, Rep Day is helping out, looking at trying to get some data for us to maybe create some options for seniors. And I know Dan McGurl and Lisa also looked at other communities and what types of programs that they have put together for seniors. Some have been pretty recent, so we get some data from Rep Day. We'll probably reconvene in a couple of weeks and maybe to come up with a program and figure out what the costs might be for that. So it is.
Like, is it like a state program, or what do you mean?
Well, I guess, I don't know if you'd maybe call it a reallocation where, you know, there are certain thresholds now where there are exemptions based upon age, income, and assets. And if you can tweak those and tweak the exemption amount, it might help some older seniors. So there's different variables on the existing exemptions. So we're looking at what other towns have done to tweak the variables. And can we do that in Winchester to help maybe more seniors?
Yeah,
Because I think right now, at least I don't know if you
seems
remember.
very limited.
It was like 30, maybe there might be 30 seniors that are getting exemptions of $1,000. So 30 is not
Very limited.
it's a very limited number, so we're trying to figure out ways to expand that.
And the circuit breaker, senior circuit breaker has a pretty low limit on the property value so there's a lot of seniors who are limited in income, but because of the property values in Winchester that have gone up from when they bought their properties, they're not eligible for circuit breaker matching. So, you know, if Rep Day could help with that, that would absolutely help as well.
And I think it's the strategy that a lot of other
Yeah.
communities have been taking and
Yeah,
have
some of
been
them
successful
have
with.
been very
So
recent,
it's-
Falmouth
yeah, yeah.
and, what was the other one, Sudbury, or, I don't know if you remember, there was a few
Yeah.
that have just, because I'm sure they're all seeing the same thing, you know, with rising taxes and seniors that are on a fixed income that have been living in their community for, you know, 30, 40, 50 years, and you hate to see the resource of our seniors that help build Winchester have to move out, so that's where we would try to make the effort.
Especially that we've increased, you know, in the past few years, investment, you know, in a lot of capital projects, you know, 25% or so already. So there's already, and I think this is exactly what's happening in other communities. So everyone's feeling the infrastructure pressure as well as the operating pressure at the same time. So there's neglected school facilities, and so we're building schools and we're, you know, increasing enrollment, and it's really putting a lot of pressure on people that never planned for this kind of increase.
The
you know.
continuum,
Yeah,
yeah.
so.
Thank you for setting that up, Dave and Mike. That sounds really important.
Team effort.
Okay, so I guess as a bottom line, this is, what we've been discussing tonight is, in the event that there is no override, what would be the budget and how much cuts would you have to make? I think we all hope that never happens. The value of Proposition 2.5, which was put in place in the 1980s, was to basically force towns and municipalities to look closely at their expenditures and go back at some intervals to the electorate and say, do you really want to have schools? Do you really want to have fire and police? And are you managing them as efficiently as you can? And I think the good news about Winchester is that, you know, with a 15-person finance committee digging into every 15 cents on the budgets and all the committees we have to advise and such like that, that Winchester is very tightly managed, very tightly budgeted, and I think that we've simply reached a point where, under Proposition 2.5, we've said, yep, we've used the money very efficiently, and now we need to go back and take a look at whether we want to continue at that level. And if the electorate says the value is in the schools and maintaining the property and maintaining the services, police and fire, then I think they'll sort of agree to it. If not, we'll be back at the table worrying about it, but I think, done a considerable amount of work to look at the details and, well, a little bit more, so, unless there are
Well, I
further,
think we'd have to
further
say that
questions
there's
on
been some excellent management, and over the past years, as the chairman indicated, there hasn't been a non-capital override in quite some time. I think you said like 10 years
10
or
years,
so,
yeah.
yeah. So, and I think that, obviously all of us acknowledge the significance of that, both the positive and kind of leading to where we are now. But it seems like there's been some excellent management, but we have sort of changed circumstances, new variables, particularly with the student
Growth.
enrollment. So, and so this is just kind of in reaction to that.
Okay, any further on this topic? Otherwise, I'll close that out. Bob?
I'm sorry, but could I interrupt before you close the meeting?
Sure.
You asked me to comment on a few things.
Do you want to come to the
Yeah, you
table?
can come up and use the microphone.
I can yell.
No, come
Okay.
on up to the table.
I just didn't, I wanted to,
We
We're al-
love
we're
having
always,
you here.
we always want to welcome distinguished visitors.
on
so-
behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I just wanted to
Thank you for coming.
mention to our listeners that hope they appreciated all the lights during the holiday season and the wreaths and all the decorations that are paid for by the Chamber of Commerce through their fundraising efforts and not by the town itself. The budget has enough issues to contend with. And a lot of people don't realize that, but the Chamber is very supportive of all the businesses in town, and hope people have appreciated what the Chamber does.
Looks
So
fantastic.
the Energy Management Committee reported to me that they were very pleased that you guys are now using LED lights as well as possible and
Yep,
reducing the cost.
we certainly
of the-
are.
And since some of them are plugged into the town sockets, so we appreciate that too.
And the town's putting in new sockets too,
Yeah.
which is very nice, so.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to pass on that comment.
Everything looks fantastic.
And please pass on to the chamber the appreciation of the town and this board for that.
We have a meeting Wednesday morning. I will certainly do that.
It really helps build community in the town. Everybody loves driving and walking through town during the holiday season. It really adds a lot of spirit.
It is beautiful, and
It's amazing.
we've extended the amount of lights we're putting up and for a longer period of time. They're not just during the brief December holiday, so.
I've had out-of-town visitors come by and look at Winchester out of the holiday season and say that the fact that there are some lights in the downtown makes it quite attractive and.
I've heard people who are on the commuter rail passing through town, coming from the northern towns, amazed at how beautiful, in the evening particularly,
Yeah.
our community is, so. We have a lot to be thankful for.
Thank you for all your efforts.
My pleasure.
David?
Could I just, when he was talking about the train station, any update on, like, their little construction project they're doing? Is any,
We have heard from,
Tom Howley,
I don't know if Mr. Howley has
Sleepless nights?
complained about the
No complaints?
jackhammers at night, but I don't know whether we've heard any complaints.
nothing? Good.
I did notice that they had already started when we had approved, them last time at the meeting, so they must have responded very quickly in order to get out there.
No,
Once
they'd
we-
actually
once we had-
started,
I know.
and then we caught up with it, yeah. But I'd say I think, I've not heard any complaints, and I'm very happy to see that T is shoring up those
Yep.
platforms and ramps, because they were in sad shape. Beth is particularly worried about the overwinter, because we salt the stuff to keep people
Yeah.
from slipping, and that has accelerated the deterioration
Okay.
pretty badly. Does the board have, I guess the one thing I would like to ask the board to do, if you get out your calendars.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Don't spend it all, don't spend our losses all at once. Okay. So I'd like to ask if people would pull out their calendars. We should set, we're scheduled to meet on the 14th and the 28th of this month. We need to make our decision on the override question probably by the 28th, with the actual wording of a motion if we want to bring it before. Well, the actual wording of the ballot doesn't have to be done until, I believe, the 16th of February, something there. But by the if we want to go for a special town meeting, we have to make a decision and tell the town clerk by the 28th. So the question is, what dates would we like to meet in February? Right now, we had talked about the 4th. The planning board consultant, Jennifer Goldson, would like to come in and give us a short briefing on the
Great. master
plan work, a series of other things. The 11th would be a special town meeting if we get to that. The 18th is President's Day, and then the 25th is the last Monday. So right now, the 4th would be the date we would post. We would post it before town meeting for the 11th. The week of the 18th is President's Day, but and that's vacation week, so, oh, sorry, February. So I'll post for the 4th, the 11th, and the 25th, unless people have concerns about that. Okay?
You said the 4th, 11th, and 25th?
Of February, yes, yeah. And then in January, we're set for tonight, 7th, obviously, 14th. Martin Luther King Day is the 21st. So we could meet later that week if we wanted to, if we think we need to. We could decide that on the 14th. And then the 28th would be the other January meeting. Okay. Any other business before the board tonight? If not, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
night,
WinCam.
WinCam, thank you very much.